The sun beat down on the volcanic ridge, turning the excavation site into a furnace. For 3 weeks, the team had moved tons of earth, finding nothing but shattered pottery and rusted iron. Every shovel strike against the dry, compacted soil felt like a waste of effort. The silence of the ridge was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic scrape of steel against grit. Dr. Eris wiped the gray silt from his forehead, his hands trembling slightly. He signaled for a halt, ready to call it a day. Then, his spade hit something that did not ring like stone. He dropped to his knees, clawing at the dirt with his bare fingers. He cleared a patch of the buried wall, revealing a series of deep, rhythmic incisions. He brushed away the remaining dust, his breath hitching in his throat. It was an animal, carved into the rock with impossible precision, its head tilted sharply toward the sky. The team gathered around, the exhaustion in their eyes replaced by a sudden, sharp curiosity. Dr. Eris traced the lines, feeling the cold stone. This was a map. Dr. Eris ordered the team to widen the trench, moving outward from the first wall. The shovels bit into the earth again, faster now, driven by a new urgency. Within an hour, they exposed a second pillar. The same animal stared back at them, carved with the exact same tilt of the head. They dug harder. A third wall emerged from the dirt, then a fourth. Every single surface bore the creature. It was not a scene of a hunt. It was not a ritual offering frozen in stone. It was a repetition that felt mechanical, relentless. The excitement in the air began to thin, replaced by a low, creeping unease. Dr. Eris moved from wall to wall, tracing the lines until his fingertips were raw. The orientation never changed. Every head pointed north, toward the high ground. He stopped at a corner where 2 walls met, the carvings wrapping around the edge without breaking stride. This was not decoration. No artist fills a room with the same image unless they are trying to say something specific. He called the team over, pointing out the alignment. They were not looking at a gallery. They were standing inside a set of instructions. The pattern was a command. Move. Go north. Survive. The team moved deeper into the ruins, following the line of the carvings. The air grew stagnant, heavy with the smell of trapped dust and ancient decay. Dr. Eris led the way, his shovel clearing a narrow passage through a collapsed doorway. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet gave way to a dense, gray sediment. He signaled for a halt. The team worked in silence, carefully peeling back the layers of debris. Beneath the rubble, they hit a wall that was not made of stone. It was ash, a thick, suffocating blanket, nearly 3 feet deep, packed tight against the floor. Dr. Eris knelt, his hands trembling as he brushed the surface. The ash was not scattered. It was pressed into every crevice, every corner, as if it had fallen in a single massive wave. He looked at the walls. There were no signs of a slow decay, no gradual accumulation of waste. This was a sudden, violent end. The entire site had been sealed in a heartbeat. He stood up, his boots sinking into the gray powder. The team gathered around, their lights cutting through the gloom to reveal the sheer scale of the deposit. It was a tomb, perfectly preserved by the very force that destroyed it. The silence in the chamber was absolute, pressing down with the weight of centuries. Dr. Eris signaled the team to begin the mapping process. They worked in pairs, placing red markers for every human remain. They uncovered and blue markers for the animal skeletons. The red markers appeared almost instantly, clustered tight in the central plaza. They were huddled together, limbs tangled, heads bowed against the weight of the ash. It was a scene of total, paralyzed panic. Dr. Eris moved to the perimeter, his eyes scanning the floor for the blue markers. He found the first one near the base of a pillar, then another 10 feet away. He kept walking, placing the blue stakes in a steady, rhythmic sequence. The team followed his lead, their movements slowing as the pattern emerged. The blue markers were not huddled. They were spread out, forming a deliberate, winding line that snaked away from the plaza. The line cut through the debris, bypassing the central chaos entirely. Dr. Eris stood back, looking at the two distinct maps overlaid on the floor. The red cluster marked a dead end, a trap of fear. The blue line marked a path. Dr. Eris turned his back on the central plaza and walked toward the northern cliffs. The ground rose sharply, a wall of jagged stone blocking the way. He pointed to a narrow gap between two boulders. The team moved in, their shovels striking hard, compacted earth. For the first day, they found nothing but loose shale and dust. The trail seemed to vanish into the cliff face. Dr. Eris stopped, his hands pressing against the stone. He felt a slight depression in the rock, a smooth groove worn into the surface. He signaled the team to focus their efforts there. They worked for 2 more days, clearing away layers of sediment and fallen debris. The path began to reveal itself, a narrow, winding track barely wide enough for a single person. It snaked upward, hidden from the main site. The team cleared the last of the obstruction, exposing a path that led away from the carnage of the plaza. Dr. Eris stood at the base of the trail, his light beam cutting through the shadows. He checked his map one last time, then stepped onto the path. The team followed, their boots crunching on the cleared stone. The trail ended abruptly beneath a massive, natural rock overhang. Dr. Eris stepped into the space, his flashlight beam sweeping across the floor. He stopped. The team crowded in behind him, their breath hitching in the cold air. Here, the ash was thin, blown away by the wind. In the center of the sheltered space lay a small, isolated group of human remains. They were not huddled in a mass of limbs like the victims in the plaza. They were positioned in a perfect, deliberate circle. Dr. Eris knelt, his fingers hovering inches above the sediment. He pointed to the arrangement of the bones and the remains of a small, stone-lined hearth. The team began the analysis, measuring the density of the remains and the distinct layers of volcanic debris. The evidence was clear. These individuals had not died in the initial blast. They had survived. They had lived for weeks in this cramped, hidden space, long enough to build a temporary camp and maintain a fire. Dr. Eris stood up, his eyes scanning the perimeter of the overhang. There were no signs of struggle, no signs of panic. They had reached this ledge with time to spare. He looked back at the path they had just climbed. Dr. Eris stepped away from the ledge and walked back to the main wall. He pulled his brush from his belt and cleared a thick layer of gray silt from the stone. The animal carving emerged, its head tilted upward, its eyes fixed on a point above the horizon. He moved to the next pillar, brushing away the dirt. The same creature, the same tilt, the same direction. He pulled a compass from his pocket and held it against the stone's surface. The needle aligned perfectly with the creature's gaze. He checked the 3rd carving, then the 4th, moving faster now, his boots crunching against the loose ash. Every single figure faced north, toward the highest point of the ridge. He stood back, his flashlight beam sweeping across the wall. The animals were not running in a panic. They were moving with a steady, calculated pace. He looked at the map, tracing the line from the plaza to the hidden ledge, then back to the carvings. The path the survivors had taken was not a random choice. It was a mirror of the path the animals had carved into the stone. The team gathered around him, their silence heavy in the cramped space. Dr. Eris pointed to the carvings, his finger tracing the line of the animal's neck. The truth was etched into the rock. The animals had not fled the eruption. They had led the way. Dr. Eris laid the map over the stone carving. The lines matched perfectly. He looked at the team, then back at the circle of bones in the dirt. The humans had not reached this ledge by accident. They had ignored the chaos of the plaza. They had ignored their own panic. They had walked in the exact tracks of the creatures they had lived alongside for generations. He traced the path on the map again, his finger pressing hard against the paper. The animals had moved with a steady, calculated pace through the falling ash, and the people had followed, step for step. There was no hesitation in the trail, no erratic turns, just a single, unified movement toward the high ground. The team stood in the dim light, looking at the remains, Then at the carvings on the wall. The bond was not a myth. It was a physical, survival-based reality. When the sky turned black and the earth split open, these individuals had looked to the animals instead of their own leaders. They had placed their lives in the hands of the creatures. They had trusted the animals' path over their own survival instincts. The silence in the cave grew heavy as the truth settled in. The humans had survived because they had surrendered their autonomy. The team stood in the absolute silence of the excavation site. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the portable lights reflecting off the stone walls. Dr. Eris stepped forward, his flashlight beam steady on the final carving. The animal was etched deep into the rock, its head tilted at a precise angle toward the ridge. He traced the line of the jaw with his thumb, feeling the rough texture of the ancient stone. The creature seemed to stare back, its gaze fixed on a horizon that no longer existed. He pulled his hand away and looked at the team. They were waiting for an answer that the rock could not provide. Did the animals simply run from the heat, or did they stop to lead the others? He looked back at the wall. The carving showed no signs of panic. The lines were clean, deliberate, and calm. He walked to the edge of the trench, his boots kicking up a fine spray of ash. He signaled the team to pack the gear. As the last light flickered out, the animal carving remained, its gaze still locked on the distant peak.